I mean, there were times that the job itself, most of the time, it was so much. Yes. Wow. So much. And 3 hours. But I can hear you. Still, sure. They hired you from Thornhill. I'm surprised you guys don't come down to the party. You gotta get me. We have Santa. Okay, you're my new best friend.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that everyone can hear me. Hello, are you there? Okay. So we have, I think we can start.
Yeah, start.
It's 10 to 11, right?
Yeah, it's okay.
It's
Version Lebanese will be good.
right? Okay. Okay, so let's start. Hello, everyone. My name is Mariam Asak. I'm a mortgage agent and a mortgage account manager with Mortgage Alliance and the Windrows Group. Thank you all for being here today. For the next 40 to 45 minutes, we all are going to learn about a solution or an option for your client. We are going to learn from an expert, one of the best in the mortgage industry. We think that you as a realtor need to stand out, need to provide more option and solution to your clients, especially these days with all changes in mortgage industry. It's getting harder and harder to find a property that your client can actually like it, find a proper mortgage and close it. So without any further talking, I'm going to introduce our guest speaker. Our guest speaker is top producing real estate investor, Eli Trainer, a mortgage broker with Mortgage Alliance. Claire Drage has been an active member of mortgage industry for more than 30 years. She has experience from all sides of the industry, from managing over 140 properties in Spain to growing her own successful mortgage brokering business in Canada. Since relocating in Ontario in 2007, her business continued to grow substantially and is consistently in top 1% nationally with Mortgage Alliance. So Claire has been in, these are only a few of her credentials. She is in top 1% mortgage brokers in Canada, CMP Women of Influence, CMP Hot List, Reader's Choice Mortgage Broker of the Year, This one, member of Canadian Association of Rent-to-Own Professionals. They have, this association are going to have a seminar in Niagara Falls in October. You're more than welcome to contact us. We will give you more information about that. And 2018 Flamborough Chamber of Commerce Professional Service Provider of the Year. We are going to learn a lot from her today. So without any further delay, I ask Claire Gray.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, how's everyone doing today? Good? Good. You thought it was going to start at 10:30. That's one way for us to get a bunch of realtors here on time, right? Just to tell you it's half an hour earlier. So it's my pleasure to talk to you today with regard to rent to own. So how many people are already thinking, whoa, rent to own? How interesting is rent to own? Very, oh, awesome. Some people are like, So I'm hoping today that what I'm going to do is break some myths about rent to own, show you how to do it properly, and also show you how it can be a great marketing opportunity to set you apart. Because how do we make you stand out from everyone else? From all the other listing presentations, the for sale by owners, I know, don't throw anything at me, but it's about a way of being able to set you apart as well. And I think that's what's important. Rent to own might not work for everybody, the tenant buyer or the investor that's going to buy the property, but it can be a great solution for you to be able to offer your clients. And again, just kind of setting you apart. So what is rent to own? Well, rent to own is basically where there'll be a tenant that will choose and select the home. They will live and rent in the home for a short period of time, typically around 3 years, with the option to purchase that home at the end of the 3-year period. And that's pretty much it. It's very simple. What I'm going to talk about today is what we call tenant first. Now, what we mean as opposed to property first. Tenant first is where you actually find the person that's interested in participating in this program, and then they go out with you to find the property of their choice. As opposed to the other way around, it's where we have a property that we think we can do rent to own in, and we have to try and find tenants to actually like that property. So it's going to be pretty cool. We're going to have lots of information. So elephant in the room. Is there an elephant in the room? Who's heard some really bad crap about rent to own? Nobody? You haven't heard anything at all? Awesome. Okay. If you Google rent to own, you're going to find some great stuff, and you're also going to find some bad stuff too. There are a lot of what I would call schemes or scams out there about rent to own. Now, you might not have heard of any negativity about rent to own, but I'll guarantee you the potential clients that might be interested in this, if they Google it, they're going to see it. So it's really important to address any objections and concerns up front. Rent to own can be an amazing fit for everybody, including us in the room. But it's got to be set up properly. It's got to be set up in a way where it's a win-win for the tenant that's going to select the home and have the option to buy it, but also for the investor that's hopefully going to have a cash flowing property for a 2 to 3 year period. So it's got to be a win-win. The bad crap that's out there are where the investor basically says, sure, just kind of sign this napkin, I'll do a rent to own. You know, you rent, and then when you're ready, let me know and you can buy the property from me. I'll kind of give you some kind of credit for the amount of time that you've lived in the home. What's the problem with that scenario? Any thoughts?
There's no prices laid out.
There's
nothing laid out writing. But wait a second, I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
When you do rent to own,
yeah,
and I've seen them,
yeah,
my understanding is that you all, let's say it's a 3-year period,
yeah,
and you do the agreement to purchase and sale with it up front, you get a deposit, or the deposit is
right,
based on the rent.
Yeah.
Usually they pay a premium where 10% of the rent is applied to the deposit, and then the tenant must, or the purchaser must come up with the balance. Now, my understanding is if they don't come up with the balance and they can't close on the date that's set out, the landlord or the seller keeps the percentage of the rent that the tenant has bought and keeps that, and the tenant doesn't get it back, and he's then free to sell the property again.
Yes and no, that would be a bad rent to own setup. So the thing that's wrong with this like napkin thing, or just not having really good solid contracts, not having independent legal advice up front, not having full awareness of the good, the bad and the ugly with a rent to own is going to be key. So we're going to go through the two different types of contracts that the tenant buyer will sign. But as we're kind of in this, let's just address that elephant in the room right now. The key thing is there's going to be two contracts. The tenant is going to be a tenant buyer, so they're going to have a lease agreement, standard form lease,
Right.
regular market rent, no extras, no extra 10%, no nothing. It must be market rents, period, in order to conform with the tenant landlord board and all that wonderful stuff, giving the protection of the tenant and the investor as well. So a standard lease agreement, paying market rents, period. Can't be inflated, can't be too low. The reason why it must be market rent is we need to be able to use that when they get a mortgage 2 to 3 years from now. We need to prove they've paid market rent and not an overly inflated rent or less than market. Now, the second agreement they're going to have is an option to purchase, not an actual agreement of purchase and sale,
But just buy
It's
an option.
an option to purchase. In that option to purchase, it will clearly state that you need to provide a deposit now in order to secure that contract and make it valid. That can range anywhere from 1 to 5% of the purchase price today.
It's
So that's
today's value?
Today,
Today's value as well?
purchase price today. Anywhere from 1 to 3%.
Okay, but now they have to still come
Hold
up
on,
with money.
hold on. Let's back up, okay? There are steps. So, well, actually, let's flip it. So you're the tenant buyer,
Yeah.
you're the investor. So awesome. So this wonderful guy here has got a tenant buyer who's going to pick a property. You're going to buy it. You are committed with the investor.
Yes.
With the investor, you've got lots of money, like students, lots of money. So you're going to buy the property as an investment property. You're going to put 20% down payment because it's an investment property. You're going to commit to not selling it for the 3-year lease.
That's fine.
That is why the tenant buyer needs to also commit. It can't just be word and a signature. They have to commit by providing a 1 to 3, maybe even 5% deposit that will become their down payment at the end of the rent to own agreement.
Jump a little bit ahead. But who do we have as a client? The investor? The tenant?
Both. That's the beauty of this. You can have both.
The hard to find for.
And who's
It's
paying you the
both. No,
commission?
it's not. Okay, let's back up. Let me go through the process before we kind of jump to, these are all amazing questions, and I will guarantee there is no question I'm not frightened of answering, and I'll give you the right answer, not the bullshit. Oh, is this being recorded? Yes. Oh, whoops. The beep answer. Okay. I think I have to stay in front of the camera so everyone else on the webinar knows that I'm still here. So trust me, we will answer all these questions. There is a commitment on both parties. This isn't for a potential tenant to find a property to rent in the regular home buying market as opposed to the rental market. So there has to be a commitment on both parties. There's lots of moving parts. And remember, what was the first thing I said when I started? It doesn't fit everybody. There's a certain clientele that this fits really well with. We're actually finding there's more and more that fit into this program as a result of things like the stress test. Self-employed individuals that don't have enough income to prove, didn't realize if you write everything off on your tax return, that can limit your options to qualify for financing on a mortgage. So there needs to be a plan in place to help that tenant buyer be able to execute on that option contract. So let me go through the process, and I think that'll answer a lot of the questions. Okay, so the process. So here is the important part. So step 1, you find someone who wants to buy a home, but they can't, right? They want to buy a home, but they can't. Why can't they buy a home? Shout out some reasons. Can't qualify. Don't have the complete down payment
No,
required.
period, don't have to.
Don't have a rent to own, might not be for them. I'm not going to buy a $500,000 home for someone that's just going to rent it and not give me a penny on
But she was
closing.
willing to pay extra on her. On
No,
her rent.
not good enough. What if she moves in and pays 1 month's rent?
No, what she was planning on doing is she planned on renting it. I know them, and they were gonna rent it out for, they figured a 3-year period.
Yeah.
Putting down an extra $1,000 every month. And at the end of the time,
Get the $36,000 credit.
no, what they were doing was they were going to have, let's say that the deposit should have been 5% or 6%. So she had to come up with a difference on the money. And if she didn't come up with a difference, she lost not only,
Yeah, that's a crappy rent to own, I'm sorry.
know, but
That's an absolutely crappy way to
if I
set
were,
up a
if I
rent
were
to own.
invested, that's the only way I would do it.
No, you wouldn't do it that way.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, yes and no. Okay. She will lose all her money,
Mhm.
but not having any money in on closing, bad investment for the investor. There's no commitment.
No, he was getting the extra money by.
Yeah, but that's a 30 days from now. What if she never pays it? Then she's moved into a property that she's only renting, has got zero commitment to pay the extra 1,000. But you as the investor have just paid $6,000 in land transfer tax, $2,000 on a lawyer. Like you've got a home inspection and appraisal report, you've got all of that extra expense. You need more of a commitment as the investor up front. I think that's what's going to be key. Now, are there scenarios where you might make exceptions? Are there scenarios based on relationship that you might find there's a way to, change some of it? Absolutely, but it's got to be a win-win for both.
I got a question.
I need to move on. Sorry,
Okay, but one
guys.
second. Is your
We need to
investor,
move on.
Can we get
We'll
with
get
this
back to you, I
first?
promise you. Okay. I need to get a red card. Red card. Okay. We qualify the client as a potential tenant buyer. We really look at their scenario. Why didn't they qualify? Maybe they didn't qualify because they got crappy credit. So their credit score isn't over 620. They don't have 2 active trade lines. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a credit improvement action plan and figure out how long is it going to take these clients, these tenant buyers, to qualify for financing. Maybe they've got collections. Maybe they went through a messy divorce. I mean, how screwed up can your credit get with a messy divorce? What if they're brand new into the country? They're brand new immigrants. They've been here 6 months, a year. They've got great job, but they haven't got the standard 2 years. They don't have any other re-established credit, and we need something else to support that. Maybe they have been self-employed for 1.5 years. So awesome. Typically, in order to qualify for most financing at reasonable rates, you need a 2-year history of filed tax returns as a self-employed individual. So maybe they're not quite there. They need another 1.5 years, but they've got good cash flow. And do they really want to wait to get into the market? So we're going to qualify the client, the tenant buyer, and then of course, we're going to build a program that meets their needs. What is their initial deposit? What can they afford on a monthly basis? Is the rent within their guidelines? Is the extra they may pay each month to build their down payment, if that was the issue on why they couldn't qualify? What does that need to look like? We don't want to set up the tenant buyer for failure. They can't afford the rent, they can't afford the extra forced savings plan on a monthly basis. This isn't a good scenario for them. We don't want them to lose all of their funds and deposit. So the next one would be, of course, purchase the property. So they will go out with their realtor of choice, who will look for a property within the price range, and of course get an accepted offer, of which the investor is the one that ends up being your buyer. You may be representing the investor and or the tenant buyer, or both. So the cool thing from a realtor standpoint is, of course, you're receiving your revenue and income on closing. So on a property or a client that maybe didn't qualify, it's like, well, I'll come back in a 1 year or 2 when I've saved more down payment, or I fix my credit, or whatever the scenario might be, then you're actually getting a sale right now. And then the tenant signs 2 documents: the standard term lease with market rents and an option to purchase the property. And we are going to go through some numbers so you can see some numbers. And then, of course, the tenant buyer builds their credit, saves the down payment. The key thing here, I think, is that if, for example, 3 years from now, they need $24,000. in down payment. And if they've given $5,000 up front, then of course we know we've got the difference. We've got $19,000 that needs to be saved or collected during the term of the rent to own to become their down payment at the end. Okay, so we're literally going to take that 19,000 and divide it by 36. That's the extra they'll pay on the option contract, and it will become their forced savings plan. So if that's an extra $400, it now becomes part of a forced savings plan for them. Because I mean, let's face it, if they were waiting to save their down payment and they haven't done it now, are they going to do it on their own, or do they really need a framework to make it happen? How many people have seen clients try and save their 5% down payment because they don't have family members that can give them the money, that are qualified to borrow it? And it's just like each year they're saving, and the car breaks down, and then it's like, oh, my friend's getting married in the Bahamas, I must go to that wedding. And you know, there's a few grand extras gone, but they've just never been able to actually save it. So this is a forced savings plan. And then a tenant obtains a mortgage and buys the property from the investor. So if you don't like that framework, then what we do have is, of course, the investor cashes out. The property is sold to the investor. But we do have a flow chart that tends to break it down for you. Now, Marianne can get you access to this flow chart. So basically, top row are all the steps that are involved. You'll notice that each item, if it's black, it's a tenant buyer. If it's circled with red, it's the mortgage broker. Circled with whatever color that is, grey, investor, and realtor. So you can kind of get to see who's responsible for all those moving parts. Who wins? So who wins in a rent to own? Well, the tenant buyer, if it's set up correctly. Okay? Yeah, woo! We're going to get to you guys in a second. You have to wait till last. Save the best for last. Of course, the tenant buyer, right? I always like to say to people, you know, this is the way to get on the property ladder today. Most importantly, I think for tenant buyers, the ones that I love the most is where if we're able to find a property that needs some work, and your tenant buyer is someone that is handy, or is maybe in a specific profession. I've had some of my tenant buyers that have called me up, Claire, we'd like to replace the kitchen, is that okay? Like, as long as you're licensed trade, as long as it's a decent kitchen, I don't want you to rip out the half decent one and put in, I don't know, some psychedelic polka dot crap that's not going to be marketable. I've seen tenant buyers put decks on, do landscaping, develop the basement, because they chose the property. They have put some cash in themselves. They've given over $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $10,000, $15,000. They have a sense of home ownership and training. As long as they follow the plan, they don't screw up their credit, lose their job, or leave the country, or get a divorce, or die. I mean, as long as there's just a few examples, that doesn't happen, they can execute on their ability to buy the property. That's a legally binding contract. I've had tenant buyers that have agreed to buy the property for $450,000. It's actually worth $550 or $600 because they have forced the appreciation in that property based on the work that they've put in it. But from the investor standpoint, what do you think the win-win is for the investor?
He gets rent for that period of time.
Yeah, cash flow.
And then he's smart. If he's smart, he's actually sold the property to the people at a price that's in the future.
Correct.
And he doesn't do it based on today's price, he'll base it on the rate, because I've done that.
Absolutely.
I had one client that I had a tenant with me for 17 years.
Yeah.
And then at the 18th year, he phoned me up, he said, Bernie, I'm going to buy the property. I said, go right ahead. And he paid me, I got the highest price in the whole
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Fabulous. That's awesome. Now let's talk about that future price. So as an investor, how many people have, don't really want to be, you heard in my bio, I had 144 properties in Spain that I managed, and every week new tenants. So can you imagine that? Like being a landlord, being a property manager can be a pain in the butt. So one benefit for an investor buying single family homes or duplexes or ones with legal suites is look at the quality of the tenant. Do you think that tenant's going to call out and go, yeah, I've got a leaky tap? Well, if they're a tenant buyer you know, a homeowner in training, they're probably going to fix it themselves. They're going to make improvements. It's their home. They have a sense of ownership. So therefore, the cool thing with that is you've got a better quality tenant. Not guaranteed. I do have some horror stories I could share, but they're definitely a better quality tenant. And I think that that is super important as an investor. The investor's also got a very clear exit strategy. 2, 3 years from now, 4 years, however long it's going to take, they're going to buy the property from the investor. Clear exit strategy. I have investors that will do like 5 a year. So, you know, 5, and then, you know, each year, 5 are selling, 5 more are buying, 5 are selling, 5 more are buying. You've got clear exit strategy, you've got cash flow, you've got low management and maintenance costs, and you've got great tenants. It's a win-win. I'm going to keep going, and we're going to save all the questions till last. Sound good?
Sure.
Awesome. Mortgage broker. So we win, because of course we do the mortgage for the investor buying the property. We then manage the relationship with the tenant buyer, keep them on track with quarterly and annually updates to make sure they qualify for the mortgage at the end of the rent to own. This is where the success of the program is, in a large part, is keeping the tenant buyers on track. If a curveball hits them during the term, they lose their job, what can we do? We work with investors that will kind of go, okay, they've lost their job, well, why don't we skip the option credits for the next 2 or 3 months until they get back on their feet? They can make them up later. But they're going to work with them to create that win-win, not just stick by the contract and be an idiot and say, well, tough luck, off you go. You know, you're evicted. They've still got that lease agreement in place. The lawyer, of course, lawyers always make money, right? When we do real estate transactions, pretty straightforward. And of course, most importantly, you have a sale. I want to talk about, we've talked quite a bit about the tenant and you having the buyers. So of course, when you have buyers that don't qualify, this can be a great alternative to discuss. Now also, but what about listings? What about when you go and do listing presentations? If you're one of the other 2 or 3 realtors that are also going to do a listing presentation, you know it better than I do, but I would like to think sometimes the ability to market and differentiate yourself is just as important as the price you're prepared to list the home for in that listing presentation. So instead of doing the standard, in addition to the standard, open houses, that you're going to market the listing that you're hopefully going to get and secure as a rent-to-own opportunity for an investor. So you'll have your standard listing sheet, but Marianne, your mortgage agent of choice, can prepare a sample rent-to-own financing options, not just for the investor to buy this property to make it into a rent-to-own, but also potential people that come round the property to look at. They can also see what are the options, what will my market rent be, what will my additional payment be, what exactly will be my deposit I need to put down if I want this property. So you're setting yourself apart. You're just providing an additional solution, a different marketing strategy. Maybe you have a rent-to-own open house instead, or as well as. That one's from 12 till 2, and then 2 to 4 is your regular one. Why not market something different? If you've got lots of people that are looking to rent and have never even thought that home ownership was a possibility, this could be a way of setting you apart. And we have to, don't you agree? Like, how many realtors are there in this area? I mean, at least 30, okay? You guys are quiet. There's at least 30, right? But there's thousands of them, right? So how do you set yourself apart? If I go into a listing presentation with, I'm not a realtor, I am a mortgage broker, so don't worry. I'm going to go in with a different marketing strategy. It's like coming to a mortgage broker, best rates, good service. To me, that's the minimum you should get. It's the other stuff that comes with it. Are there alternative solutions? Are there ways of helping you grow your business? Do you get more listings and you secure more buyers? It's just a different marketing strategy for renters, for investors, and for regular home buyers. It's just another edge. Even if it's just a sample of this in your listing presentation, it's just another thing that you do that's different. Would that stand you out amongst the other 2 realtors that have probably done a presentation? Absolutely. You've got a, you just got a better chance. So don't look at rent to own. If you're already thinking, oh, rent to own doesn't work, the numbers don't work, don't like it, don't like the sound of this is all like, bleh. Just think of it as another marketing opportunity for you to differentiate yourself and set yourself apart. Because that's what we use it for as mortgage brokers, right? So the benefits, well, let's talk about the benefits from the investor's standpoint, okay? So benefits, of course, there's an upfront deposit for the investor. So we talked about when they sign that option to purchase agreement, the tenant buyer is going to have to part with some cash. Typically, we're looking for around 3% of today's purchase price. So whatever today's purchase price is. Bad rent-to-owns are where, the listing price was $500,000, you were able to secure it for $450,000, you're a great realtor, it was a motivated seller, blah, blah, blah. But then the investor decides that the actual starting price today is $500,000 for the tenant buyer. That to me is crap. The price should start on the purchase price for the investor.
Why?
Why not? That's a win-win.
Hold on.
Win-win.
It's
No,
not
I'm
a
going
win-win.
to, it is
It's
a
not a win-win.
win-win. How can it not be a win-win?
Okay, why would the investor stick $500,000 or $450,000 into a property? And, okay, so he gets his rent up front, that's fine.
Yeah.
And
Cash flow.
cash flow. So, but 3 years from now, if he kept it just as a rental, he'd probably be able to sell it for $650,000.
What makes you think he's not going to do that?
Well, he
Let
has
me
to make
let
an
me go
agreement.
through the
Okay,
rest.
okay.
No more quick. Can we have some duct tape on this dude? So, upfront deposit for the investors. The investor's going to get, hopefully, in a $500,000 or $15,000 deposit from the tenant buyer. So, if this isn't going to work if your clients have zero money, if like they have zip, nilch, nada, it's not going to work. They've got to have a commitment. They've got to be able to write a check and put a commitment down. Could be inheritance, could be a gift from a family member. There's got to be something to make the investor want to buy that $500,000 home and basically freeze and hold it for 3 years. Okay, so the investor in this case gets $15,000 up front. It's going to help support all the closing costs, and maybe there's a little bit extra. Cash flow, got to be cash flow. Like if that $500,000 property, the market rent is $1,200, it's not going to work, right? It's not going to work. So the market rents have got to be able to sustain a reasonable cash flow with a 20% down payment, a 30-year amortization, of course, the most amazing rates from mortgage brokers they can possibly get as an investor. So it's got a cash flow. Even if it only cash flows by $50 or $100 a month on market rents alone, it's a cash flowing property. They've got an initial deposit at this point. They've got great tenants. And then they're also going to build in that capital appreciation. We haven't even talked about mortgage paydown. Now let's talk about capital appreciation. So the investor's going to get a lump sum at the end. So that property for $500,000. So let's say today the property is worth $500,000, and the tenant buyer has the option to purchase it in 3 years from now. They're not going to buy it for $500,000 because what's the point? We're going to build in future value estimation. So for example, what's the current market doing around here right now? What are you seeing if you were to tell someone what the market's going to increase or decrease, or is it staying flat over the next 12 months? What would you say?
3%.
About 3%.
3
3 to 4%. So what we do is, this is where it's important. This is where that win-win really comes in. We rely on you guys who are the experts to really look at the market and kind of go, if it's 3 to 4%, so we think the values are going to go up 3 to 4%. We might say, well, you know what? It's an election year. The bond market sucks. No matter what the Bank of Canada said this morning at 10 o'clock in their announcement, things aren't that great in some areas in the economy. We're very lucky. We're in Toronto, center of the universe, blah, blah, blah. Things are rosy. So we might say, well, you know what? If I increase the value of that home 4% every year, is that creating a win-win? Is that fair? I might kind of go, you know what? Maybe 4% is a bit high. If we think 3 to 4, what if it only goes up 2% this year? Maybe we have a crappy election and nothing goes our way. Who knows? but next year it goes up 4, and the year after that it's flat. We may decide, the numbers will help us decide if it's going to work or not for the investor, that we might say, well, let's add 3% year over year. So does anyone want to do some quick math for me and just add 5% on 500,000, 3% on 500,000, compounding every year? Sound good? And then I'll come back to you for that number. So see what we're doing? We're building in appreciation. Now, bad rent-to-owns are when someone says, well, the market's going to go up 3 to 4%, so we'll just rack up the price by 5% every year. Because they don't ever want them to buy it. They don't want to set them up for success. So that future value and pulling off of your expertise is going to be key to make sure that it aligns with the market. Now, yes, are there going to be circumstances where there's money in the buy, you got a great deal, they did a lot of work, they got, they got appreciation while they maintained the property, they decorated it, maybe they took out the cracked linoleum and the green carpet and put in nice hardwood or whatever. That home could be worth, instead of, what was that, 3% appreciation?
556.
556.
Around that.
So say 560, let's just round it up for shits and giggles.
Yeah, it's easy.
So 560. So the investor is guaranteed a sell price of 560. We're creating a win-win, not a greed situation.
That's right.
Okay, it's got to be a win-win. That capital appreciation of that extra 60,000 and the cash flow and the mortgage pay down minus the deposit and the extra they're paying each month, does it make sense financially for the investor? Because if it does, that investor's not going to get greedy. It's not going to be an hole if things go south or there's a few months where they're late. They're going, and that's where it's the investor that's important. If it's someone that's greedy, that says in 3 years from now that home's not worth 560, it's worth 700 or 600. The investor needs to be comfortable to be able to go, good for them. They worked hard, they stuck by their plan, they were great tenants. I've made my 60 grand plus cash flow minus mortgage pay down and my deposit, blah, blah, blah. I've made a 25 to 40% return each year on my investment. I'm happy.
Yeah.
Right? It's got to be a win-win. But if that investor is someone, when I say to an investor, how would you feel 3 years from now when the home's worth 650 and you're selling it to them for 550? How would you feel? And if they're smiling like that, going, good for them, right? But if they turn around and go, well, I'm just going to find a way to get out of it, then they're not investors we're working with. Mm-hmm. These are people that want to do rent to own, not just to make money, but to do the right thing and give people a chance to home ownership. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not all like roses and sunshines, unicorns and rainbows. Things do go wrong, and it's just a matter of setting it up right in the first place to make sure it is a win-win. And I think that's what's important. Okay, yes?
Is the profit around let's say 60,000 in this example?
Yeah.
But minus, you have to pay realty taxes. And
Yes.
when he purchased.
Not when it's sold, no. Your investor will never pay realtor fees. Sorry, guys. No,
Why?
because he bought the property, who pays for realtor's fees?
Oh, okay. Because
Oh,
it's-
yeah.
It comes a private sale. So sorry, guys, at the end of 3 years,
Oh, yeah. You don't have an option.
I see.
it's a private sale. It's an option to purchase contract. It's an option contract.
Oh, but
So you get paid up
if you
front.
put into the contract that.
Yes. You can just say whatever. Okay. Profits are determined up front. Win-win, remember. Profits are determined up front. Okay. So the investor's going to have a good idea exactly what their profits are going to be. And of course, there's multiple exit strategies. So what we mean by that is the ideal one is the tenant buyer buys the property. Yay, sunshine and rainbows. But what if they can't? What if they don't? I had tenant buyers where he died during the term. So the husband died. She had good income, she had fixed her credit, but of course the emotional turmoil, property was worth a fortune. We extended another 6 months because the timing sucked. So the investor agreed to extend the rent-to-own agreement another 6 months. He died like 2 months before she was due to execute on the option to purchase. We've had others that have got some inheritance and executed early. Now, if they execute early, so say that it's a year before they're due to buy, and they're like, well, we want to buy. Technically, in the contract, it says they have to pay 560 in our example here. So technically, they have to pay the option to purchase price. The investor can go, you know what? You're going to save rent for the next year, 6 months. That profit I determined. Remember, profits determined up front. That was what I expected to get. So you need to pay 560, or you can stay for the term. Or the investor might say, well, you know what? I wouldn't mind getting my money out. Maybe we'll meet halfway. And maybe you can buy it for 545 or 550, do a little bit of a reduction. Again, don't have to. It's not built into the contract that that's an option, but they can execute at any time they want to purchase that property for that end price. They've got up to 3 years, typically, to be able to execute on that. Sound good? Okay. Oh, actually, multiple exit strategies. What if they can't? What if, 2 months before closing, they, I don't know, moved to Spain? Why not, right? And walked away. We've had tenant buyers that divorced, and they both walked away. They're like, we're out of here. They both walked away from everything. So now I'm an investor left with an empty property. So of course I could find another tenant buyer, take a bit longer. Of course I can just sell it, flip it, or it's a regular rental, because when we set it up at the beginning, we made sure it would cash flow as a rental. Didn't have to be a rent to own in order to create that additional monthly cash flow. Okay, help someone get back on their feet. That's that warm and fuzzy, feel good, and of course lower risk.
So when the tenant, let's say, decide to move or whatever, not buy it, they lose all the deposit.
Correct.
Right?
Yes and no. Okay. So in the option to purchase contract, it clearly states that your deposit and the extra option credits you're paying each month are 100% refundable, minus liquidated damages and costs to relist and sell the home. Technically, it's going to cost me 5% now to list my home and sell it with a realtor. It's an empty property, I have to stage it. So technically, they lose it. That's the commitment. The investor's going to commit to not selling the property in 3 years. You get a 3-year lease, I'm not going to sell it. They've got to commit to buying it. If they walk away 6 months in, and all they've paid, in your previous example, $6,000.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Or if they pay 15 plus an extra 500 each month, and they paid, I don't know whatever that is, 18,000, they're walking away from that. Because the whole point is to keep both parties contractually bound. Now, it has to state in the option contract that it's 100% refundable to meet the default insurer and lender requirements for the tenant buyer to get a mortgage at the end.
Oh, it does have to.
Must. Not unless your tenant buyer's got cash. Not unless your tenant buyer doesn't need a default insured mortgage.
Repeat that again, I missed that.
100% refundable, minus liquidated damages to relist and sell the home.
But
Right.
the last thing before.
What did I say before that? Remember?
I think regarding the mortgage, that you need the mortgage broker.
Oh, yeah.
Something-
Oh, yes. So that in order so when we get the mortgage for the tenant buyer 3 years from now, technically the only thing that's different for them getting a mortgage 3 years from now is that their down payment is not cash. It's from option credits on a rent-to-own agreement. So the government, the default insurer, in their wisdom, decided that because there were so many crappy rent-to-owns out there, that it must clearly state in the contract that the option credits are 100% refundable, minus liquidated damages to list and sell the property. 100% refundable minus liquidated damages. That covers our asses both ways. That covers the tenant buyer to get a mortgage and use the option credits as proof of down payment, because they don't have 90 days history of savings in a bank account. Their down payment is what they've been paying over the last 3 years. And that's important. Okay, we need to keep moving because we're going to run out of
When the
time.
market dies, like it happened 2 years ago, and they cannot get the mortgage.
Then they can't get a
Whose fault
mortgage.
is, like,
There's
it's
a
not their
risk on
fault.
both. There's a risk on both.
Right.
Now, hopefully, if the market flattens You've got to look at it from the investor's perspective. So let's say today is 3 years and I'm due to buy this home for 560, but instead it's worth 500. It's been flat for 3 years. Nothing's changed, 500. Now, as an investor, I've got to look at that and go, okay, do I extend for another year and see what happens? Or do I evict them and keep their 30,000 they've paid me in the last 3 years? If I do that and I go to sell, I'm going to lose even more money because the market's flat. My exit strategy, if they're not buying it, I have to sell it myself. So immediately selling it myself, I'm down 5% in my realtor fees approximately. So it's, what's it going to cost me
So the
more?
tenant loses it either way.
They could.
The market
They
does.
could. Typically what I've seen with the investors that we work with is if the market's flattened or it's retracted, can we create money in the buy? So can we quickly throw in 20 grand and do renos, increase the value? Because let's face it, if they have a default insured mortgage, we need a default insurer valuation. I think we all know sometimes we can stretch that a bit. I mean, obviously they're still going to get a mortgage for whatever the sell price is. I mean, that's important. And or are we extending the rent to own to see if the market's going to turn around? And that's where your expertise really comes in today on what is the future value. This property, like if you were buying in like Oshawa, for example, before the 407 came in, you know, would that there have been a bigger lift in the market because as you know there's infrastructure, you know there's 407 expansion,
Oh, sure.
you know, like all those extra things. It's that data that's going to be really, really key. Is how, like, if typically we wouldn't do rent to own on like a condo in downtown Toronto, because right now a condo is in downtown Toronto, hot or cold?
Hot.
Hot. 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5
Still
years
hot.
ago.
And harder.
Hot.
Could have been hotter.
Shouldn't say.
But what about 2 or 3 years from now?
Still gonna be hot.
Who knows? But I think we all agree we've seen condo markets in Toronto that sucked too. It's timing, right? Just like if you retired in 2008, how much of your RSPs do you think was still left? Right? Not much. That's probably why you're realtors now. Anyway, so what are the drawbacks? So can be more work to set up, right? I mean, how many moving parts have we got? Like, holy crap, tenant buyers, pre-screening them, making sure they're okay, making sure they understand the contracts, they need to get independent legal advice, we need to find an investor, you need to buy the property, we need to make sure everyone's happy, they move in, we watch the tenant buyer over 3 years and then they buy the property. There's lots of moving parts, right? That's why working with someone like us that is experienced in this and does it all the time is going to be key so you don't have to worry about it. Lots of moving parts. We have active income. So one of the drawbacks is talk about active income for the investor. It's only for 2 to 3 years. So once they sell the property, that investor's income has gone. You could call that a drawback. But what if I don't want to sell in 3 years? Well, you're not doing a rent to own, dummy. You know, you're going to do a flip, you're going to do a bird, you're going to do a buy and hold, maybe you're going to do a duplex, triplex, fourplex, do multifamily. Because most single family homes don't cash flow on their own without the extra payments coming in with the option credit. I think you'll all agree with that as an investor. Single family homes don't typically cash flow without having some form of extra in rent to own, the option consideration to help support that. Still have to manage tenants. You hope they're better than the normal, but they're still tenants. They still need to be protected under the Tenant Landlord Act. Profits are capped. To your comment earlier about if that home's worth 600, the investor might be like, ooh, you know, a few shots to get over the shock, but that was the whole point of them creating a win-win in the first place. So the numbers. So is the purchase price fair market value? That's got to be key. Purchase price has got a fair market value. I say that because if the property that your investor is buying is part of a multiple bidding war scenario, it's pretty much out of luck. Because here's why. A bidding war scenario, there could potentially be an emotional price premium attached to the value of that property that only has value to the tenant buyer. So what I mean, is everyone familiar with what I mean by that, you know, emotional price premium? Like you're in a bidding war, it's your 5th one, I've got to have it, got to have it. And the investor will not pay 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 grand above list price just because it's the only one you've seen that you like. Because that's an emotional price premium you're asking the investor to pay for that may not translate into future value down the road. We're starting that baseline way too high, way too high. Our concern would be that $500,000 home you pay $580 for, now that future value's got to start at $580. Like we're kind of getting a bit into danger zone. What's the expected future value? Is it realistic? I think we've covered that. What's the available deposit? The tenant buyer's got to have enough to make a commitment. They've got to be serious and make a commitment. You've got to pay land transfer tax. You've got to pay legal fees. As the investor, that investor wants to make sure they don't expect it to cover their 20% down payment, but at least cover their closing costs. I've had new to Canada, people that are brand new to the country, who've got large sums of money. And they've come in and they said, well, we could put 35% down and get a mortgage on a property with no income, because we could get them that, no problem. But they don't want to put 35% down, because that's a chunk of their money. They need to buy vehicles, put their kids through schooling, or winter clothes. So, like, there's all sorts of things they have to buy. They may decide, you know what, why don't we put 10% down and do a rent to own? So we're doing a rent to own on someone that has no income, but we have a larger deposit. So we would deem that to be, now what I would do is want to see, well, what sort of field are they in? What sort of job will they be looking for? I don't want to take their money and then not be able to buy it. But if they are an engineer and they're just waiting to do a few courses in Canada to get their Canadian experience, as an immigrant, I know the feeling when you don't have Canadian experience, but you need to get that in order to work in your field for the salary that you deserve. So that can be a good scenario too. Does the market rate provide excess cash for the investor? So yeah, if that $500,000 home market rent's $1,200, that's not going to work. But if it's $2,500, $2,400, yes, that's going to work. Will the future value exit strategy be sustainable? Provide the profit? These are all numbers that we do up front to make sure it works. And will it provide great home ownership opportunity for the tenant buyer? We have to have yes for every single one of those. It's got to be a win-win. It's got to make sense. So qualifying the clients, we're conservative. I will qualify the tenant buyers, that is. I won't use baby bonus. I won't use support and alimony if the kids are in their teens. I won't use bonus or overtime unless they're in a field where it's a standard. Like if they're a police officer and you're always going to get overtime. I mean, or shift differential, there's always some extra that you're going to earn. I mean, you can just go like, and I work a few funerals on a Saturday and you get extra money, right? I would use an average of the last 2 years' income to qualify them. But if someone's in a field where they get a bonus every year and it's too variable, that can change. I'm not going to use that to qualify them today because I need to be sure that I can get them a mortgage at the end of 3 years from now. Back in the day when we used to, some mortgage brokers would qualify tenant buyers on a 40-year amortization. Remember the good old days? 100% financing, 40-year amortizations, you know, interest rates at 2.5% for a 5-year fixed. Woohoo! But imagine if I qualified them and right now we're at 25-year, 5.34 benchmark rate for qualifying, we'd be setting those tenant buyers up for failure. So we're conservative. We use 6 to 7% interest rate today to qualify them for their future mortgage. They will not build in wage increases unless it's very clear, like they have a union job and we know it's going to go up 2.3% based on their union contract, for example. So conservative qualifying of the tenant buyer so they can get a mortgage at the end. There's no minimum credit score, but we need time to build it. So that's key. So if they have no credit, but we just need to get them 2 active trade lines for 2 years with major accounts, that's the length of the rent to own minimum term we're going to build in. So there is no minimum. We've had crappy credit, ex-bankrupts, divorce, 20 collections, lots of scenarios where we have had time during the rent to own to rebuild. Gross income times 4. This is important. So rule of thumb is someone earns 100 grand. Well, your purchase price is 400,000. Simple. Slide. It kind of needs those little divots so you know to slide it, right? Because I think I did that when I came in. So, times income times 4. This is actually a good number for you to use for your clients even now. It's like, oh, I make 100 grand a year, but I want to buy $1 million home with 10% down payment. You only qualify for a $400,000 mortgage, so you better have a big down payment. This is what we call the gross income multiplier. Used to be 5, now it's 2, unfortunately. Bankruptcy is a fine, being ex-bankrupt, we need a good reason, and no real estate involved in the prior bankruptcy. And we probably won't go to the bank that had any creditors that were involved in the bankruptcy. Yes?
When you say gross income, what type of income?
Again, verifiable. So if you're self-employed, 2-year average, we can gross up line 150, we can do add backs using capital cost allowance, home expenses, and motor vehicle costs. So for realtors, for example, we're commission, there's no cash component, not we. As a mortgage broker, I'm commission only, the same as you guys. But we can add in things like capital cost allowance, motor vehicle expense, which is usually second to marketing, is our biggest expense, and also, what else? Home office expense. So we need to build that in. If someone's self-employed and wants to be a tenant buyer, I need their last 2 years tax returns, I'll need 6 months bank statements. We're going to work through what they need to file in order to make sure they qualify at the end of the rent to own.
What is investment income?
2-year history. And the assets that they're getting the investments from has got to be secured and long going. We have to prove the principal they're earning interest on is not going to be spent. But sometimes if someone's got like a trust, but the trust runs out when they turn 45 and then the money, I don't know, goes to charity or a cat's home or something, then we just need to make sure that the principal is still going to be there, that the investment income we're relying on to qualify is still going to continue. Down payment, 3 to 5% we talked about, that's the initial option consideration, and they can have collections and crappy credit. Of course, it's like saying, buy a home with a realtor. Use a mortgage broker that knows what they're doing with regard to rent to own. This is it ranges from 9 to 15 pages. This is the rent to own tenant buyer analysis we give the tenant buyer. So if any of you had a buyer right now that's challenged with trying to qualify for a mortgage, we would do a full application. And I mean employment letters, pay stubs, bank statements, the regular. We're going to paper them to hell. Because I want the full story up front. We want to know what do we need to do to make these people's dreams of home ownership a reality. When they do that, they receive this report. It's going to cover everything they need to know about rent to own, how to fix their credit, what their journey is going to look like, how long the rent to own term needs to be, how much of a down payment do they need to get at the end, any nuances with their income we need to consider. And that puts them on the plan. Once they've got this, they then decide if it's going to be something they want to work through. And then, if your tenant buyer can't purchase, basically, the key thing if your tenant buyer can't purchase is why, and is there a solution that we can try and find for that? Like, don't get me wrong, I've got tenant buyers that it doesn't matter, like you can lead a horse to water, but I ain't paying off your freaking collections. I didn't go to Vegas because I saw your Facebook page and I see you were in Vegas for 3 days at the casino, and that was your closing costs. Like, we can't fix stupid, do you agree? Right? But we can create a win-win in order to provide a good solution. So, if people can't help themselves, what can we do? Sometimes we have to let them walk away because they didn't listen. Or you tell someone you need 2 active trade lines for 2 years and you're in a 3-year rent to own. So they decide after multiple times you haven't got a credit card yet, you didn't apply for that small loan I gave you the application form for. Like, if they don't do it, they're like, oh, well, and they do it 2 months before closing. Stupid. Like, we don't tell you to do it now. We don't put you in a 3-year rent to own because you can do it a week from now. It's because you need to do it immediately to create that exit strategy. Our role, well, you know what? You determine the purchase price, we determine the down payment, the period of the rent to own, we do a detailed analysis, and we follow up with the tenants after they've moved in. We want the mortgage for the investor up front, and we want the mortgage for the tenant buyer at the end of the rent to own. We need to deserve that. So that's why when we have tenant buyers, we work through the entire term with them to keep them up to date. Quarterly updates, annual reviews and checkups.
Just to be clear, you said our role, that means your mortgage person's role.
We're going to determine, yes, correct, sorry. We're going to determine the purchase price 3 years from now.
Okay.
If we've decided the rent to own is going to be a 3-year term, because that's how long it's going to take us to fix their crappy credit, we're going to tell you the maximum they qualify for 3 years from now. So if that example we had earlier, and it was 520,
Yeah.
so I'm saying 3 years from now, they need 5% down payment, they need to fix all their credit, maximum mortgage they'll qualify for based on a 6 to 7% interest rate with a 25-year amortization and a 5% down payment is 520. We're now going to go backwards. And maybe that's going to be a 460, 470 purchase price today. So we give you the end, you find a home today. And the market can change.
And let's say you do find them a home.
Yeah.
Now you've got to find an investor. Unless you can find the seller of the house, and let's say he's downsizing, can the seller of the house do the same thing?
Absolutely. But protect your commission.
What?
Absolutely, but protect your commission. And that's the whole point of, pitching a property as a potential rent-to-own property. It fits like the right demographic, 2 to 3 bedrooms, maybe a single attached garage. It fits the right demographic of potential tenant buyers. It's an awesome situation.
I got some.
Cool.
I'll give you the name.
Awesome, yeah, give them to Marianne. I'm just your guest speaker today. I'm not your mortgage broker. Marianne's going to be the one to reach out to.
And she can do this.
Yes, absolutely. She's on my team. She's one of my top agents on my team. So you kind of get me, you get 2 for 1, but you don't get to speak directly to me. Okay, so financing a rent to own. For the investor, it's just a regular rental. They put 20% down, 30-year amortization. Of course, they get the best rates. It's a great opportunity to joint venture partner. What do I mean by joint venture? So you want to buy real estate, but maybe you don't qualify for a mortgage. You don't have 20% down payment, but you have some rather wealthy friends and family. And you might say to them, hey, listen, I'm going to find the tenant buyers. I'm going to manage the process. I'm going to work with a great mortgage broker that's going to help us. I will find the property. I'll find the tenant buyers. Will you be the investor that will provide the down payment and qualify for a mortgage? We'll split the profits 50-50.
Is a deposit held by the investor for
Yes.
to use,
Yes.
not the lawyer in trust?
Correct. By the investor.
So you can use that money.
Correct. Absolutely.
by
We
investor.
can't use it as proof of down payment for the investor. They've got to have their own 20% down from their own sources. But absolutely, it goes to the investor. It goes directly to them. It's not held in trust for a number of reasons. Not what lawyer would want to keep 20 grand in trust for 3 years. Like they'll get into so much to-dos. It's only supposed to be short term. The whole point being the investor has the opportunity to use it for closing costs, etc. And stick to your plan. Use a power team, of course, people that know what they're doing. Some tips and tricks. I'm going to go through these quite quickly. So the first one is get the client pre-qualified. The last thing we want you to do is leave here today and go, yay, I heard about this amazing program. So come on, buyers, we're going to go look for properties and Claire and Marianne will figure out what investor's going to buy this sucker for you. No, you need to get the tenant buyer qualified first. We need to give you end purchase price 2 to 3 years from now. How much down payment? What's their monthly budget going to be? We need to do all of that first before you set yourself up for bigger gas bills in your vehicle and disappointment for your clients. We want to make sure we get that in play first, for sure. Go with your gut. If it doesn't feel right, it isn't. Pretty simple. Due diligence, due diligence, due diligence. Not only on the mortgage brokers you use, but of course the realtors. Look at all the values we need to figure out in order to make sure this is a great win-win. Pre-screen, be in the driving seat. Take control of the scenario. If we tell you maximum purchase price today is 470, we mean 470. Not unless you're going to give the tenant buyer a new job making more money than they're making now. We'll just simply say to you, 470 is 470. It's not 430 to 500. Like if that's the purchase price, that is the maximum. We need to ask you to stick to it. Keep your power team on your toes. And of course, don't get creative advice. That's fraud. We do not commit mortgage fraud. We set these up properly. We're not going to pretend for the investor it's a principal home and do a 5% down mortgage. No, that's fraud. We're not your mortgage brokers of choice if you want to get into that game. So we do it properly. We do not have to commit mortgage fraud to make this work. Questions? Yes.
What if something happens during the time which damages the property?
Yeah.
Who is responsible? And if the insurance doesn't cover the whole.
Absolutely. So in the option to purchase contract, the typical requirement is up to $750. The tenant buyer pays for it. Above $750, it's the investor's responsibility. But during the due diligence, it will be mandatory to have a home inspection. And that home inspection needs to be, like if it says, oh, you need to do a roof and new windows in 12 months. Well, there's all the profit for the investor. It's probably not going to be a property they're going to buy, unless your tenant buyer is a window installer and a roofer. Maybe his uncle's a roofer, and we're going to build into the contract that he's responsible for doing that work. But the key thing is going to be the property has got to be in decent shape. That's where that property inspection that we actually ask the tenant buyers to be part of is going to be key.
In regards to the profit now, let's say you have calculated the number 560, and the tenant has now really upgraded to the health of the home, and the value of the home is now, let's say, 700.
Yeah.
What happens between the 650 to the 700?
Tenant buyers.
Oh, good.
It's theirs. It's theirs. Right? It's
Yeah.
theirs. And that's the whole beauty of it. Is if they're upgrading the home, if they're making improvements, they're getting the benefit of that. So in that scenario, 560 was the purchase price. Investor is still happy because he made his profit. But the tenant buyer screwed up their credit. Maybe they put all these renovations on their credit cards and made some late payments, and they don't qualify for a mortgage. Most lenders, as you know, will use purchase price or appraised value, whichever is lesser. I've had scenarios where the tenant buyer wants to buy but can't qualify. No matter they have something else happened, they don't qualify for a mortgage. We've actually been able to secure them with a private or a subprime mortgage at 65% of the appraised value, not purchase price, which has given them enough to be able to buy for 560. With me? So sure, for a year, they might have to pay 8% interest rate, but who gives a crap? You just
Would be
paid
a B
140
lender, right?
grand.
It would be a B.
It'll be a MIC, a mortgage investment corporation. So like B minus, C plus, maybe?
Yeah, actually, I like the program, and I can see it can really help out with everybody, and also especially help out with the tenant too. So I think it's a great program, and so that it's like it's a triple win for everybody. But I can see there is a lot of moving parts, which I see here, and it's actually I can see any number of possibilities where things can go really, really wrong.
Absolutely.
And one of them, which I think is a state issue. Not on the tenant, not counting on the buyer, but the property owner. So because like if he dies,
Their
then
estate has to make like
Right,
any legally
exactly.
binding contract.
Yeah.
The estate has to honor the contract.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely. Just like if I run over by a bus tomorrow, but I'm due to close on a property, this dude sold me at the end of the month, my estate's legally bound to.
But sometimes it can go wrong with
Yeah,
their
okay.
estate. Let's say that person died
It's the risk,
bankruptcy or in
it's
here.
the
here,
risk
so
everyone
everything here.
takes. That is
So-
also a risk. What if the
so-
investor goes bankrupt
Right.
during the rent to own?
Right.
Now, the only way, there's a bit of a, can't stop that happening, but can we reduce the likelihood?
Yes.
Yes, because with rent to own, if the investor needs to qualify for a AAA plus mortgage interest rate, right? So if the rent to own is only 2 to 3 years, like I guess they've got to super screw up in that 3-year period to go bankrupt.
Sorry, I really did. You have to go on comment in a couple minutes. So the question, one question which that is in my hand, which I want to ask, because in this case, let's say the person that the buyer, the owner did really stupid here or died something. Can you also stipulate within the contract that maybe the owner, the builder will get some sort of life insurance on it? Can you stipulate it?
I guess you could. In the contract, it does say that the buyers have first right of refusal. And if someone died, like the investors die, there is a clause in there which says that, you know, they're legally bound to the contract and their successors and estate can amend it to execute on this contract.
Right.
So there is all of that. I mean, the contract is like 18 pages long for the tenant buyer, which does cover a lot of those things.
Right.
But I couldn't force an investor to get an insurance policy.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, no, good questions, yes. How am I doing for time? I don't want to keep you guys too long. I'm here between you and a pizza, I think. Have we got time for 2 more questions? No, we're done. Okay, we're gonna hang around. We're gonna hang around for to join you guys for lunch. So I want to thank you, but I want to bring Marianne up first for a few minutes before you guys pack up, so she can wrap up and talk about some of the books we have for you.
So thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much to Claire and all of you. I just wanted to let you know that we have a sign-up sheet here. If you'd like to have a copy of the presentation, if you want us to send you the realtor listing sheet for your client, and if you want us to be on our mailing list to get an update for next presentation that we are going to have, we have a series of presentations. One of them is actually first-time home buyers, quick cash, and also how to be the banker investment. So please sign this sheet off so we can keep you posted, and I can send you a copy of presentation. Okay, thank you so much and have a great day. Thank you. Go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, nice.
Speak to her. She wants restoration. And I told her what it would cost. And I didn't realize that she had, I thought she was going to have a premium. But she's not going to do it. Phone her, get her a project. Yeah. Because I know her husband is in trouble. Her husband works for Global. I met him. And what the problem was, he didn't pay his taxes. He hasn't filed 2018. He has done 2017. He had to pay $16,000. So he has to pay it again in 2018. He knows this already. So if you phone her, and she's working for somebody, I don't know exactly what she's doing. I knew I don't know if they have to up the money down. So you'll have to figure that out. But I was going to ask one thing. I wanted to see if
Also, can I do no, I wouldn't be able but then I will need
there you go. What she's going to do, the mother is going to help him out. Okay, the mother doesn't have a mortgage. What I thought is that what happens if the mother uses a reverse mortgage on her house to help them? Okay, so you can phone them and see if they come and then call me back. That's their number. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Nice meeting you.
But it sounds
It's okay.
No, because I know Marion, because we're in and so Marion. I use her. To support her.
You guys,
Then, whatever, let's say, so from 500,000. The original buyer. 500,000. So he loses his deposit.
He's a color attorney or everything, but his father died. He's on the state, but he's excited about this situation. They're waiting for him. But he wants to buy that property. When you said I did it, but he has a property. As my client, if he wants to buy the property, and that's what you and he can get because he already has equity on this house because he's the only part of this home.
Right, okay, so he wants to buy from the siblings? Is that what's happening? Okay, so, yeah, so he wants to buy their share and he doesn't have money or a job right now, right? So it's, it can be set up.
He has a job in the US. He has a property, but he doesn't have a job right now. Exactly here.
But it can be set up. However, other siblings should be on board to be investors. They might not have their share right away. They might say that I need money right now, right? Yeah, okay, so if that's the case, we want an investor from outside. We can set it up as he can just pay the rent for the term of 2-3 years and then buy it out from the investor, right? That's one thing. But other thing that I would say is depends on the scenario. We might end up just doing a mortgage. Even private mortgage makes better sense.
They have a mortgage on this house. If they want to sell it, they have to
Pay it off.
pay it off. He cannot get the money yet because he's, but unless the situation happens, he went to